We're starting in on the book of Joshua. We reached two major milestones in our local studies here. Last week was Easter. We did not have a Sunday school. And the week before that, we finished the study of Leviticus. This past Wednesday, we finished the study of Luke. And so we're going to move from Luke right straight into the book of Acts. And we're moving here from the Pentateuch right straight into the book of Joshua, the first of the books that are considered the historical books. And I took a look at this title, and I think this title just says it all. We're going to be reading about victories. People will be involved, but they're God's victories. We're going to reading about promises. And when you think of Joshua, at least I do, I think of the promised land. But if there's one word that this morning's session is the take home, is the word that's buried inside the word God, and it's the word go. Victorious living in God's promises. So there's a picture of the books of the Bible, and we're finishing up. We finished the Pentateuch, and God hits us right between the eyes. In verses 1 and 2, he says, Moses, my servant, is dead. And we're going to spend some time on that. But then we get into this section of the scriptures. We begin with Joshua, we end with Esther. In Joshua, we see the taking on of the land. In the Judges, we can see that cycle of sin, oppression, repentance, and deliverance. And just like a slinky, the morals of the country going down and down and down. In the book of Ruth, we hear about a Moabitess who was grafted in to the bloodline of Jesus. 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, we read about the kings of Israel and of Judah, starting with Saul and ending up with the Babylonian captivity. Then we have Ezra and Nehemiah, the return to the land, and ultimately Esther, a story of God's providence for the Jewish people everywhere, all places, all times. He will always have a remnant. And so that window of time, the history that we're about to study, covers 900 years from 1400 BC to 500 BC. Here's a kid's view. I couldn't find an adult view that did it justice. So we're going to live with the kid's view of Joshua leads Israel. And I don't think we're going to go all the way through chapter 5 today. Battles with the Canaanites, the dividing of the land to the 12 tribes, and ultimately Joshua's final words. The key verses, one is from the front end, one is from the back end. And you will be seeing Joshua 1, 5 through 9 several times this morning because we're going to draw so much information out of that. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Joshua had some growing to do, and this is what he said at the end of the book. Choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your fathers served in the region beyond the river. He's going, the gods you served, past tense, beyond the Jordan River. We're going to talk about crossing the Jordan River. Beyond the Red Sea, Egypt. We're going to talk about Egypt and Canaan. Whether you're going to serve the gods you served in the region beyond the river or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you now dwell. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. So we're going to look for Christ in Joshua, just like every single book of Scripture. You look for Christ in that book. So first of all, we see Christ typified in Joshua. Of course, the name Joshua is the Hebrew equivalent of Jesus, which means Yahweh saves. We see it in Rahab's scarlet thread, symbolizing safety in the blood of Jesus. I was teaching this class one time, and I had to be a Freudian slip. I kept talking about not the red thread, but the red light. And of course, Rahab was a harlot. And afterwards, Jenny came up to me and she said, "Do you know what she was said? The red light." I said, "No way." And then somebody else came up to me and said, so I hope I don't make that same mistake this morning. There's a theophany, a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus Christ in the book of Joshua. And we read it here. Joshua lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man was standing before him with his drawn sword in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said to him, "Are you for us or are you against us?" And the man said, no, I am the commander of the army of the Lord. Now I have come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshiped and said to him, what does my Lord say to his servant? Now, a lot of times in the Old Testament, you see the phrase, the angel of the Lord. And sometimes it's a theophany, a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus Christ, and sometimes it's an angel. In this particular case, we know it was the Lord because of that word worshiped. An angel would not have allowed Joshua to worship him. And the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, take off your sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy. And Joshua did so. Sounds like the burning bush episode. I think it's the same voice and it's the same person. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now, there's a lot of finality to the phrase, so-and-so is dead. There are many situations in Scripture where you see that phrase, so-and-so is dead, but I want to draw these out, these three. Lazarus is dead. Jesus said that to the apostles before he came down into the land. And what happened to the apostles? Their hearts sank. They wanted Jesus to go and heal Lazarus. Jesus tarried for 2 days. Lazarus is dead. Jairus' daughter was dead. And they had the cadre of people coming and professional mourners. Different reaction to that situation. And then, of course, Jesus said, it is dead. And I think of those two people, could have been husband and wife, and never said who they were. Those two traveled to Emmaus, and they said to the stranger who ended up being Jesus, we had hoped. Jesus was dead. Moses, my servant, is dead. There's a line of demarcation there. Moses, my servant, is dead. And when that happened, there were changes coming. There would be no more manna, no more pillar of fire, no more pillar of cloud, and no more Moses. Think about it. Let's say we had a national leader who was perfect integrity. We have to imagine that, right? Imagine for 40 years, he had successfully led this country through wars, through famines, through unpopular situations. We studied Moses and how the people constantly grumbled. And all of a sudden, this leader is gone. Who's going to fill those shoes? Now, therefore, arise, go. I said that's the one word if you went home with, that's the word. Go over this Jordan, you and all this people into the land that I am giving to them, to the people of Israel. Now, as we do this study and you go home, and I hope that you read ahead, I want you to pay attention to the tenses of the word give. Here you see, pre-Joshua, I have given them the land. I have given. And yet over here we read, I am giving. What you see here are promises. In 2 Corinthians, we read that all of the promises are yes in Christ. We haven't received that yet, but the promises are there. The Bible talks about past tense, and you whom he has justified, he has also sanctified, and he has also glorified, all past tense. You look up here, I don't look very glorified, but in God's mind, he's already given me, and I already have everlasting life. The book of Joshua is a book of stories. We read about the promised land. And it's really not about the promised land. It's about God's promises. And you see there a phrase, not a picture of heaven. Well, I can imagine the notion of the promised land being equated to heaven may have come out of the American Black history, where pre-Civil War, the promised land and the Negro spirituals, swing low, sweet chariot coming forth to carry me home. But Israel is not a picture of heaven. Israel is going to be filled with strongholds and walled cities and over 30 kings that have to be conquered. I'm looking forward to a heaven where there is no giant for me to overcome, and the only walled cities will be the walls of the New Jerusalem. But back to the Black American. When they were in slavery, their view was freedom. They got their freedom. In comes Jim Crow. In comes the prejudice of the rest of the people of this country. But they had their freedom. This is a picture of Egypt and Canaan. Both Egypt and Canaan are pictures of the world. Egypt is a picture of the world pre-salvation, and Canaan is a picture of the world post-salvation. We're supposed to be in the world. We're in Canaan, but we're not supposed to be of the world, of Canaan. And so what's really the purpose of the book of Joshua? We read in 1 Corinthians, now these things happened to them, the Hebrew children, the Israelites. These things happened to them as an example, and they were written down for our instruction. So yes, there are going to be some great stories there. I had the picture of the kids and the walls tumbling down and all those other kinds of things. But there are lessons to be learned in the book of Joshua. So who was Joshua? First, he was Moses' assistant, then Joshua, the son of Nun, the assistant of Moses from his youth. Now, the first time you really read about Joshua is when Moses sends the 12 spies up into Israel to spy out the land from Kadesh Barnea. And we're going to get into more detail about that. And he didn't send the elders. He sent select men, that were capable of going through that and doing some living off the land for 40 days. And he was a young man. He was a leader in battle. When Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. And whenever he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. And he jumped down to verse 13. And Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his people with the sword. Now, I don't know, as that battle was going on, if Joshua looked over his shoulder and he saw Moses with his hands held up, held by Aaron and Hur, and the victory was going. And I don't know if he looked over his shoulder when he's trying to shout retreat and the hands are going back down. I don't know that. But what I do know is Moses wrote down that phrase and he gave those scrolls to Joshua. So if he didn't experience it, he read about it. So he was Moses' assistant from his youth. He was being cultivated. Just like each and every one of us, I'm not in my youth anymore, but I'm still being cultivated, and so are you. He was the only one allowed on Sinai along with Moses. If you recall the story, Moses went up to Mount Sinai and God told him, don't let anybody touch this mountain, not even the animals, because you're going to die. And yet Joshua was allowed to go up there. The Lord said to Moses, come up to me on the mountain and wait there, that I may give you the tablets of stone with the law and the commandment, which I have written for their instruction. So Moses rose with his assistant Joshua, and Moses went up into the mountain of God. I don't think Joshua got to see the Lord like Moses did, but he got to see some things that the rest of the Hebrews did not. He was a man of prayer and worship. We read here, when Moses entered the tent, we're talking about the tabernacle, when Moses entered the tent, the pillar of cloud would descend and stand at the entrance of the tent, and the Lord would speak with Moses. And when all the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the entrance of the tent, all the people would rise up and worship, each at his tent door. Thus the Lord used to speak to Moses face to face, as a man speaks to his friend. And when Moses turned again into the camp, his assistant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, would not depart from the tent. He saw some things on Sinai that the others didn't see, and he heard some things in the tabernacle that others didn't hear. He was a man of faith and courage. Now, let's think about that for the moment. The first wonderful thing that he did was he led the people to the Jordan River, and he said, this Jordan River is going to dry up and we're going to cross over. Well, it'd be easy to say that if the Jordan River were already dried up, but it was at flood stage when he told them. He was a man of faith and courage. Now, Joshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, were among those who had spied out the land. They tore their clothes and said to all the congregation of the people of Israel, the land which we passed through to spy it out is an exceedingly good land. Before I read this next verse, I got to explain that one preposition, translated if. Sometimes that word means a condition, and sometimes that word could easily be because. And Joshua, a man of courage, is using it as a because kind of word. Since the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into this land and give it to us. Not, I hope the Lord delights in us, and if he does, then we'll get the land. It was because the Lord delights in us. He will give us into this land and give it to us in a land that flows with milk and honey. He was full of wisdom. He was full of the Spirit and wisdom. We're going to draw some parallels as I complete this list. He was full of the Spirit and wisdom. And Joshua, the son of Nun, was full of the Spirit of wisdom. Now we're going to jump to Acts and talk about the selection of deacons, and Stephen in particular. We, the apostles, will devote ourselves to prayer and to the ministry of the word. And what they said pleased the whole gathering, and they chose Stephen, a man full of faith and of the Holy Spirit. He was a man who, look at that underline, wholly followed the Lord. Are you following the Lord today? I'll ask the question, are you wholly following the Lord today? What is the greatest commandment? Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy mind and all thy soul. I'm guilty. I haven't given God my all. And my guess is, if we're each honest with ourselves, we haven't either. So there's a laundry list of who was Joshua. And I'm going to ask the question, do you see Timothy in that list? And we're going to bring Timothy up a couple of times. And I'm going to ask the question, what about candidates for church leadership? You know, we've got a relatively young pastor. He has seen some battles. He brought this church through COVID, and we've just blossoming. He has dealt with, I don't know how many deaths and births and marriages. And he has had battles that we've got no clue of. And so the same prayer that we have for Joshua is going to be the same prayer that we need for our pastor. So what did Joshua and Timothy and Pastor Tony need on an ongoing basis? God told Moses, charge Joshua, encourage him, and strengthen him, for he shall go over at the head of this people, and he shall put them in possession of the land that you shall see. So Moses, of course, he followed the Lord, and Moses summoned Joshua and said to him in the sight of all Israel, he was giving an example, and I want to be an example to you right now. We need to pray for our pastor, encouragement and strength. Well, what about a pastor that's well seasoned? If you look at Paul's requests, he is also praying for courage and for strength, and that his message would be acceptable. Now, that's a key word, acceptable, because he did not sugarcoat his message so it would be acceptable. He was delivering the truth, and his prayer was really for the people, that the people would receive the truth. Moses said to Joshua in front of all the people, "Be strong and courageous, for you shall go with this people into the land that the Lord has sworn to their fathers to give them, and you shall put them in possession of it." So here's a transition. And it wasn't like our country where you have an election in November, you quarrel about it for a while, and you have an inauguration in January. Moses died. Joshua, you're it. Because without Joshua in place, they would be like sheep without a shepherd. So the Lord said to Moses, "Take Joshua the son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand on him. Make him stand before Eleazar the priest and all the congregation, and you shall commission him in their sight." I highlighted the word Eleazar because you're not going to read too much about him through the book of Joshua until you come to the end. At the end of the book of Joshua, there are 3 burials. They're burying Joshua at the age of 110. They're burying Eleazar, and they're burying the bones of Joseph. And they're saying, this is the end of an era. Joshua's going to finish off the book by saying, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." And then comes Judges, downhill. And Moses did as the Lord commanded him. He took Joshua and made him stand before Eleazar the priest and the whole congregation. He did this in front of 2 million people, and he laid his hands on him and commissioned him as the Lord directed through Moses. He commissioned him for service, not serviveus, but service. The book of Joshua, and Joshua begins as the servant of the Lord. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant. He started off the servant of the servant. And there you see many, many times where Moses is called the servant of the Lord, but he ends not just the servant of the Lord, but he ends as the servant of the Lord. After these things, Joshua, the son of man, the servant of the Lord, died, being 110 years old. But he went through some growing pains, and we're going to be talking about those pains. And in the introduction, I said we're going to see this verse and those leading up to it several times. How will Joshua pull this off? "I will never leave you nor forsake you." We hear that in Joshua. We hear that in Hebrews. Hebrews tacks on, "so that you may not be afraid of what man may do to you." Joshua was victorious. The Bible says we're more than conquerors. But sometimes we get weary in the battle. Parallels in Timothy. "For God gave us not a spirit of fear." Keep in mind, we're coming back on those 2 key points, courage and strength. God did not give us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. "You then, my child, be strengthened by the grace that is in Christ Jesus. And what you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also." It'd be wonderful if Moses did a brain transplant and gave everything from Moses to Joshua, but if Joshua didn't pass it on, what good would it be? In Peter's second epistle, he talks about stirring up the pure minds and remembrance, because he knew that he was soon going to have to put off this body. He was going to die, just like Christ told him he was. But he wanted the people to keep this stuff fresh in their minds so that we can tell others. "Moses, my servant, is dead. Now, therefore, go." Remember, I told you that's the word. Moses, my servant, is dead. Go. So you see the little arrow. That's where they are on the east side of Jordan, getting ready to cross the Jordan. And all those pink arrows are the various conquests that we're going to study over the next few weeks. But right now, he's on the Transjordan. He's on the east side of that river. And every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given you. I've been given a promise. I have been given eternal life. But I'm also growing in the Lord. He's giving me sanctification. He's giving me the opportunity of being separated from the world and separated to him. From the wilderness and this Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites to the great sea of the Mediterranean, toward the going down of the sun shall be your territory. That was the real estate he was promised, and he's going to get that when Jesus Christ comes back. But right now you got this little sliver surrounded by places like Syria and Jordan and this hokey thing called Palestine. God's charge for Joshua. This is the Lord speaking. No man shall be able to stand before you. Think about it. He sent hornets to drive the people in front of Joshua and the armies. I'd like to think that Oxford chose the hornet as its mascot because of those verses, but I haven't been able to substantiate that. I'd love to start the rumor and see if it comes all the way back around. Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land. He wanted that strength and courage to become contagious. Only be strong and very courageous. The book of the law shall not depart from your mouth. Well, it's a book, so it shouldn't depart from my eyes. It shouldn't depart from my heart, but it shouldn't depart from my mouth either. He was telling Joshua, Moses took the time to write all this stuff out. The Holy Spirit inspired every single jot and every single tittle. And so your job, Joshua, is to spread the word. We're supposed to go and we're supposed to spread the word. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. So Joshua assumes command. And Joshua commanded the officers of the people. He just heard from Yahweh as he said, go and share the word. And so he's going to share the word. And he says, pass through the midst of the camp and command the people. So he's passing it down. Prepare your provisions, for within 3 days you are to pass over this Jordan to go in to take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Imperfect tense, it's an ongoing thing. He's promised it, I have given you, and now it's going to actually happen. The Transjordan, that means across the Jordan. And to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and half the tribe of Manasseh, you can see on the map on the east side, the right side, you see the land of Reuben, the land of Gilead, and a portion that belongs to Manasseh. And you see the arrow, that's where they're standing at the time. And to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and half the tribe of Manasseh, Joshua said, remember the word that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, the Lord your God is providing you a place of rest and will give you this land. Your wives, your little ones, and your livestock shall remain in the land that Moses gave you beyond the Jordan. But all the men of valor among you shall pass over armed before your brothers and shall help them until the Lord gives you rest to your brothers as he has to you. So what he's saying is you guys can have the land that was promised you. It's grazing land. It's great for you. But we want the men, the soldiers, to come with us. That title is Transjordan. And today that's the kingdom that's today called Jordan. And the answer, Joshua, All that you have commanded us, we will do. And wherever you send us, we will go. And the heading I have up there, it sounds like Sinai. Moses, well, first of all, the Lord boomed out the 10 commandments. And then the people said, have God talk to Moses, because if you give us number 11, we're all going to die. So God in his mercy spoke to Moses. Moses spoke to the people, and the people said, sure, we'll do it. The law is the schoolmaster of sin, and nobody save Jesus Christ. Nobody except for Jesus Christ is able to ever keep that law. They said, sure, we'll do it. Just as we obeyed Moses in all things, grumbling for 40 years, just as we obeyed Moses in all things, so we will obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with us as he was with Moses. No more pillar of fire, no more pillar of cloud, no more manna, no more the clothes will not wear out. Read Psalm 105. No more will their sandals not wear out, but they're going to be given the promise of the land. So it takes us into chapter 2, the spies and Rahab. You see, my guess is everyone has heard this story before. So it's my opportunity to remind us of the goodies that are inside that story. So you see the spies sent, the spies protected, the spies informed, the spies promise, and their report back to Joshua. We'll talk about Rahab for a little bit. And in the same way, was not Rahab the prostitute justified by works? Now, a lot of commentators have tried to soften Rahab's position. They said, well, she was a prostitute, but she turned into an innkeeper, and so blah, blah, blah. Well, James nails the head. He says, Rahab the prostitute. And we're going to talk about some women in the lineage of Jesus that have not the best pedigree. Rahab is one of them. Was not Rahab the prostitute justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out by another way? Now, the book of James was controversial, and some people didn't even want to add it to the canon of scriptures because of this faith based on works. That's not what this thing is trying to say. Rahab, by faith, we're going to read a little bit deeper. Rahab, by faith, protected the spies. So vertically, she had the faith. Horizontally, those men saw her faith because of the way she protected them. Justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out by another way. For as the body apart from the spirit is dead, so also faith apart from works is dead. Go. You believe in God? The Bible says the devil also believes and trembles. But someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith apart from your works, and I'll show you my faith by my works. And Joshua the son of Nun, that was the lead in. Here we go with the scriptures. And Joshua the son of Nun sent 2 men secretly from Shittim as spies. Now, the word Shittim means thorns, and we're going to get to that in a little bit. But Shittim was the place where the Hebrew children prostituted themselves with the Moabite women, thanks to Balaam. Remember Balaam and the donkey? So they left a place of prostitution and they meet a prostitute. Go view the land, especially Jericho. And they went and they came into the house of a prostitute whose name was Rahab, and they lodged there. While Israel lived in Shittim, the people began to whore with the daughters of Moab. That was the beginnings of the place called Shittim. But now we're going to see something very interesting in the end times. Some of the things that were a snare in these passages become a place of hope, a place of the ultimate fulfillment of God's promise. And in that day, This is talking about the millennial reign. And in that day, the mountains shall drip sweet wine, and the hills shall flow with milk, and all the stream beds of Judah shall flow with water. They're coming out of the threshold of the temple, and a fountain shall come forth from the house of the Lord, from the temple, and water the valley of Shittim. And it was told to the king of Jericho, behold, men of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land. The bad news didn't travel very slowly at all. Then the king of Jericho sent to Rahab, saying, bring out the men who have come to you, who entered your house, for they have come to search out the land. But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. And she said, true, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from. And when the gate was about to be closed at dark, the men went out. I do not know where the men went. Pursue them quickly, for you will overtake them. When is civil disobedience okay? Peter and John were preaching in the temple courts, and the Sanhedrin put them in prison for it. And what was Peter's response when he was told don't do it? He said, it's better to obey God rather than man. Go back several decades from what we're reading about this, and the midwives were told, take those boy babies and throw them into the river. And when they were cross-examined, they told Pharaoh, the women are too lively and the baby, it's too late by then. Corrie ten Boom, World War II, protected the Israelites, the Jewish people, and the book and the movie that came out, The Hiding Place. If she were interrogated, you have any Jews in here? Well, no. There was a question of life and death. The book of Deuteronomy tells us, choose life. Now, you can't take that thought and apply it to situational ethics. Is this worse than that? And they're both shades of gray. That's not what this is talking about. It's talking about black and white and not shades of gray. But she had brought them up to the roof and hid them with the stalks of flax that she had laid in order on the roof. So the men pursued after them on the way to the Jordan as far as the fords, and the gate was shut as soon as the pursuers had gone out. Now, it's important to note that they went in the direction of the camp. They went towards the Jordan. And if you can picture the map of Jericho, there is Jericho in the plains of Jordan, and they started marching towards the Jordan. And what did she tell the men? We'll get to that. Before the men lay down, she came up to the roof, and they said to them, I know that the Lord has given you this land. And it was by faith that Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient, because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. And we read in the genealogy of Jesus, and Salmon, the father of Boaz by Rahab. Then you see Boaz, Obed, Jesse, and Jesus, of course, is the son of David. And you see those 4 women that are tied into the genealogy of Jesus. You see Tamar. She was the daughter-in-law of Judah. And had died and Onan had died. They were brothers. And when the 3rd brother was born and raised, Abraham protected him from Tamar, because the rule was that he was supposed to be married to her and raise children for the sake of those. And Tamar lay with Abraham, and that's where those babies and the bloodline continue. So there you have Tamar. You have Rahab the harlot. You have Ruth the Moabitess. She was a Gentile grafted in. And then you have Bathsheba, the adulteress with David. Seedy characters that became part of the bloodline of Jesus. Well, needless to say, I'm a seedy character, and I was allowed to become covered by the blood. I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that the fear of you has fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. Well, God predicted it. He said to Moses, this day I will give to put the dread and fear of you on the peoples who are under the whole heaven, who shall hear the report of you and shall tremble and be in anguish because of you. And early in the Exodus, here's Moses' father-in-law, Jethro. Jethro heard of all that God had done for Moses and Israel, his people. The message was traveling. There was no CNN. There were no embedded reporters. There were travelers, the caravan travelers, and the word got out. And when the word got to Jericho, we're going to see how deep their hope was gone. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt. That was 40 years earlier. Keep in mind, they went through the crossing of the Red Sea and then 40 years in the desert. And we heard what you did to the two kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you devoted to destruction. Numbers 21 tells us about that during the wanderings, they wanted to pass through the land of the Amorites. The Amorites said, no can do. And so they fought them and they killed them. And as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted. And there was no spirit left in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. How do you think Joshua was encouraged when these guys come back and said, you know what Rahab told us? And then Joshua passes that on to the people. He said, their hearts have melted us. It's in our hands. Now, Joshua had generals. Can you imagine Joshua talking to the generals and he said, now this is the battle plan. We're going to take and we're going to walk around that city every day, once a day for 6 days. And on the 7th day, we're going to do it 7 times. And then we're going to blow the trumpets and the walls are going to come tumbling down. That's a victory by faith. Now, of course, the generals must have believed it because that's what they did. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that as I have dealt kindly with you, you also will deal kindly with my house, and give me a sure sign that you will save alive, not just Rahab, her mom, her dad, her brothers, her sisters, her extended family, and deliver our lives from death. And the men said to her, our life for yours, even to death. If you do not tell this business of ours, then when the Lord gives us the land, we will deal kindly and faithfully with you. We're going to come back to the family in a little bit. Then she let down through the window. Now I look at these pictures and I say, where's the window? Okay. And I also look at this picture. I don't know if you can see it there, but there's the rope and they're rappelling down the wall. And this guy must be super strong because he's holding on to the rope with one hand and he's holding on to this red cord in the other hand. So he just played the game. He's saying, here, take this cord and hang it outside your window. We're going to come to the cord too. And she said to them, go into the hills. Which way did the posse go? The posse went towards the Jordan. So she says to these guys, go to the hills. And so go to the hills or the pursuers will encounter you. They were all over. So they went to the ford, because not the car, but they went to the place where it was easy to cross the river. But that's not where these guys were. They were hiding out for 3 days. And we're going to see the 3 days come out many times, a picture of Jesus in the grave. The men said to her, we will be guiltless with respect to this oath of yours that you have made us swear. And behold, when we come into the land, you shall tie this scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down, and you shall gather into your house your father and mother and brothers and all your father's household. What does Acts 16:31 say? This was Paul talking to the Philippian jailer. He said, believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and thou shalt be saved, and thy household. She had about 2 weeks to visit mom, dad, brothers, nieces, nephews, however they were, and convince them that the Israelites are for real. To convince them to keep the secret. To convince them to come to the house. Now, then if anyone goes out of the doors of your house into the street, his blood shall be on his own head, and we shall be guiltless. But if a hand is laid on anyone who is with you in the house, his blood shall be on your head, just like the Passover lamb. I can't believe it's 9:47. Finish on this comment. When the angel of death passed over the land of Egypt, he saw the blood on the doors and not the worthiness of the inhabitants. The Israelites will see the cord in the window and not the worthiness of those that are inside. And we're going to quit there.